My name is Emma, and I'm about to tell you the most satisfying revenge story you'll ever hear. It's about betrayal, manipulation, and how I systematically destroyed the life of someone who thought she was untouchable. But before I get to the revenge, you need to understand exactly what this person did to me. Because what happened was so calculated, so cruel, that when you hear the full story, you'll understand why she deserved everything that came to her. It all started 3 years ago, when I was 24 years old, fresh out of college and trying to make it in Chicago as a marketing coordinator. I had landed my dream job at a boutique advertising agency called Creative Pulse, and I was finally starting to feel like my life was coming together. The only problem was my living situation. I was renting a tiny studio apartment that was eating up most of my salary, and I knew I needed to find something more affordable if I wanted to have any kind of social life or savings. That's when I met Sophia Chen. I had posted on a roommate finder website looking for someone to split a nice 2-bedroom apartment with. Within hours, I got a response from Sophia. Her message was perfectly written, friendly but professional, and when we met for coffee, I was immediately impressed. She was 26, worked as a social media manager for a tech startup, and seemed to have her life completely together. She was beautiful in that effortless way some people just are. Long black hair, perfect skin, always dressed like she'd stepped out of a magazine. But more than that, she was charming, funny, and seemed genuinely interested in being friends, not just roommates. We found a gorgeous apartment in Lincoln Park. Exposed brick walls, huge windows, modern kitchen, the works. It was more expensive than what I had budgeted for, but Sophia convinced me it was worth it. Think of it as an investment in our quality of life, she said with that perfect smile of hers. Plus, when we have parties here, we'll be the envy of everyone we know. The first few months of living together were amazing. Sophia was everything I had hoped for in a roommate, and more. She was clean, considerate, and fun to be around. We'd have wine nights on Friday, trying new restaurants on weekends, and she even helped me pick out outfits for work. She had this way of making me feel like I was part of something special, like we were living this glamorous city life that I had always dreamed of. But there were little things that should have been red flags. Things I was too naive and trusting to recognize at the time. Sophia had this habit of asking very detailed questions about my life. Not just casual roommate conversation, but really specific stuff. She wanted to know everything about my job, who my boss was, what projects I was working on, which clients I was handling. She'd ask about my family, my background, my insecurities. At the time, I thought she was just being a good friend, showing genuine interest in my life. I was so grateful to have someone who seemed to care that I told her everything. She also had this way of giving advice that always made me second-guess myself. If I was excited about a work presentation, she'd say things like, "That's great. I just hope your boss appreciates how hard you work. You know how some managers can be about taking credit for their employees' ideas?" If I was happy about a date I'd been on, she'd mention how some guys are just really good at saying what you want to hear in the beginning. Looking back, I can see that she was systematically undermining my confidence while positioning herself as my wise, protective friend. But at the time, I just thought she was looking out for me. The other thing that should have been a warning sign was how obsessed she was with appearances and social media. Sophia's Instagram was like a work of art. Every photo perfectly staged, every caption carefully crafted. She had thousands of followers and was always getting invited to events, product launches, and parties. She'd spend hours every day maintaining her online presence, and she was constantly taking photos of our apartment, our meals, our outings. Personal branding is everything these days, she'd explain when I teased her about how long she spent on her posts. You never know who's watching, or what opportunities might come from the right exposure. I started to notice that in all the photos she posted of us together, she somehow always looked amazing, while I looked okay at best. The lighting would be perfect on her face and harsh on mine. Or she'd be posed perfectly while I was caught mid-laugh in an unflattering expression. When I mentioned it once, she laughed it off. "You're being paranoid. You always look great. Besides, it's not about the photos, it's about the memories we're making." But the biggest red flag of all was how interested she was in my relationship with Jake. Jake Morrison was my boyfriend of 8 months, and I was completely head over heels in love with him. He was 27, worked as a software developer for a finance company, and was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. He was smart, funny, ambitious, and incredibly kind. We had met through mutual friends, and our relationship had developed slowly and naturally. He wasn't the type to rush into things, which I appreciated. He was thoughtful, considerate, and made me feel like I was the most important person in his world. Sophia was fascinated by Jake from the moment I first mentioned him. She wanted to know everything: how we met, what he did for work, what his apartment was like, what his friends were like, even what his family situation was. Again, I thought this was normal friend behavior. She was excited for me, interested in this important person in my life. When Jake started coming over to our apartment regularly, Sophia was always incredibly friendly and welcoming. She'd make elaborate dinners for the three of us, suggesting we have roommate bonding time. She'd dress up, even for casual nights in, always looking effortlessly beautiful, in ways that made me suddenly conscious of my own appearance. Jake seemed to enjoy her company, which made me happy. I loved that my boyfriend and my best friend got along so well. When the three of us would watch movies together, Sophia would always have insightful comments about the plot or the characters. When we'd discuss current events or work situations, she always had thoughtful opinions that made Jake nod approvingly. "You're so lucky to live with someone so cool," Jake told me once after Sophia had made us an incredible dinner and then entertained us with stories from her latest work event. "She's like the perfect roommate." I agreed completely. I felt so fortunate to have found not just a roommate, but a real friend, someone who made my life better, richer, more interesting. I trusted her completely. That trust was the biggest mistake of my life. The first sign that something was wrong came about 6 months into our living arrangement. I had been working on a major campaign for one of our agency's biggest clients, a luxury skincare brand that was launching a new product line. It was my first time leading a campaign, and I had been putting in 12-hour days for weeks developing the creative strategy, coordinating with the design team, and preparing for the client presentation. I was incredibly excited about the project. The creative concept was strong, the execution was polished, and I felt like it was going to be the thing that really established me at the agency. I had been talking about it constantly at home, bouncing ideas off Sophia, even practicing my presentation in our living room while she gave me feedback. "This is going to be amazing, Emma," she told me the night before the big presentation. "You've worked so hard on this. You deserve all the success that's going to come from it." The presentation went perfectly. The client loved the concept, approved the budget, and my boss, David, was thrilled. It was exactly the kind of career breakthrough I had been hoping for. But 2 days later, David called me into his office with a concerned expression. "Emma, I need to talk to you about something sensitive," he said, closing the door behind us. "I got a call yesterday from someone claiming to be a friend of yours. They said they were concerned about your well-being and thought I should know that you've been struggling with some personal issues that might be affecting your work." My stomach dropped. "What kind of personal issues?" "According to this person, you've been drinking heavily, having relationship problems, and they were worried that you might be taking credit for work that isn't entirely your own." David looked uncomfortable having this conversation. "Now, I don't believe any of this, and your work has been excellent, but I had to ask, is there anything going on that I should know about?" I was mortified. Not only was none of it true, but I couldn't imagine who would have said such things about me. I assured David that I was fine, that my work was my own, and that whoever had called was either mistaken or had malicious intent. "I figured as much," David said. "Your work speaks for itself, but I wanted you to know about the call in case this person contacts me again. That night, I told Sophia what had happened. She was outraged on my behalf. That's horrible. Who would do something like that? Do you think it could be someone from work who's jealous of your success? She was pacing around our kitchen, genuinely angry. This is exactly the kind of toxic behavior that holds women back in the workplace. Someone sees you succeeding and tries to tear you down. Her reaction made me feel better. At least I had someone in my corner who understood how unfair and hurtful the situation was. But then, strange things started happening more frequently. A week later, I was supposed to meet Jake for dinner at a restaurant we had been looking forward to trying. When I got there, the hostess told me that someone had called earlier to cancel our reservation. Jake was confused when I called him. He hadn't canceled anything. The following week, I was expecting an important package from a client, samples for a campaign we were developing. When it didn't arrive, I called the shipping company, only to discover that someone had called and redirected the delivery to a different address. Then there was the incident with my credit card. I went to buy groceries and my card was declined. When I called the bank, they told me that someone had reported the card stolen and had it deactivated. It took hours to sort out, and I had to prove my identity with multiple forms of documentation. Each incident was relatively minor on its own, but together they created a pattern of disruption and stress in my life. I started to feel paranoid, wondering if someone was deliberately trying to mess with me. But who would do such a thing? And why? Sophia was incredibly supportive through all of it. She helped me deal with the bank, offered to pick up packages for me, and was always ready with a sympathetic ear and a glass of wine when I needed to vent about the latest inconvenience. I think you should consider that maybe Jake is involved in some of this, she said one night after my gym membership had mysteriously been canceled. I mean, he's the only other person who has access to some of your personal information. I was shocked by the suggestion. Jake would never do anything like this. He loves me. I'm sure he does, Sophia said carefully. But people can be complicated. Maybe he's feeling threatened by how well your career is going. Some men have a hard time when their girlfriends start to outshine them professionally. The idea seemed ridiculous to me, but Sophia planted the seed of doubt. And once it was there, I started noticing things differently. When Jake came over that weekend, I found myself watching him more carefully. When he used the bathroom, was he going through my things? When he was on his phone, was he being secretive about what he was doing? When he asked about my day, was he gathering information he could use against me? Of course, the answer to all these questions was no. Jake was the same loving, supportive boyfriend he had always been. But Sophia's suggestion had made me suspicious and paranoid in a way that was completely unfair to him. This is what I understand now that I didn't understand then. Sophia was gaslighting me. She was creating problems in my life and then positioning herself as my ally, while simultaneously undermining my trust in the people who actually cared about me. She was isolating me, making me dependent on her support and perspective. But the worst was yet to come. The real betrayal began subtly, the way the most devastating attacks always do. It started with small changes in Sophia's behavior that I initially attributed to work stress or other factors. She began working late more often, coming home with stories about demanding clients and important projects. She'd arrive home looking perfectly put together, despite claiming to have had a 12-hour day, carrying takeout from expensive restaurants and talking about impromptu business dinners. The startup world is so intense, she'd explain, settling onto our couch with her designer bag and restaurant leftovers. Everything is about networking and relationship building. Sometimes I feel like I'm working 24/7. Around this same time, Jake started becoming less available. Our regular date nights became irregular, canceled at the last minute due to work emergencies or sudden changes in his schedule. When we did spend time together, he seemed distracted, checking his phone more frequently and seeming less engaged in our conversations. "Is everything okay?" I asked him one evening, after he had been particularly distant during dinner. "Yeah, just work stuff," he said, not meeting my eyes. "You know how it is." But I didn't know how it was, because Jake had never been the type to bring work stress into our relationship. He had always been present, attentive, and communicative. This new version of him was someone I didn't recognize. Sophia, meanwhile, was becoming increasingly interested in my relationship troubles. "You seem upset lately," she'd observe, settling in beside me with a concerned expression. "Is everything okay with Jake?" I found myself confiding in her more and more. I told her about Jake's distant behavior, about my fears that he was losing interest in me, about my insecurities regarding our relationship. She was always sympathetic, always ready with advice and reassurance. "Long-term relationships go through phases," she'd say. "Maybe he just needs some space to figure things out. The best thing you can do is give him room to breathe and focus on yourself for a while." Her advice seemed reasonable, so I started pulling back from Jake. I stopped initiating plans, stopped texting him as frequently, tried to appear less needy and more independent. I thought I was being mature and understanding. What I was actually doing was creating exactly the distance that Sophia needed to move in. The first concrete evidence I had that something was seriously wrong came on a Thursday evening in October. I had been feeling sick all day, a stomach bug that had left me nauseous and exhausted. I left work early and came home planning to sleep off whatever was making me feel terrible. When I walked into our apartment, I heard voices coming from Sophia's room. That wasn't unusual. She often took work calls or had friends over. But something about the tone of the conversation made me pause. The voices were low, intimate, and one of them sounded familiar. I crept closer to her door, feeling guilty about eavesdropping, but unable to shake the feeling that something wasn't right. "Can't keep doing this," I heard a male voice say. A voice that made my blood run cold because I recognized it immediately. It was Jake. "I know," came Sophia's voice, soft and reassuring. "But we have to be careful. Emma can't find out. Not yet. She's already suspicious about something. And if she knew the truth—" "I hate lying to her," Jake said. "She doesn't deserve this." "She doesn't deserve a lot of things," Sophia replied, and there was something cold in her voice that I had never heard before. "But that's not our problem right now. We have to think about what's best for us." I stood frozen outside the door, my mind trying to process what I was hearing. Jake was in Sophia's room, talking about lying to me, talking about some truth they were hiding from me. The implication was clear, even though I didn't want to believe it. I heard movement inside the room, the sound of someone getting up. Panicking, I rushed to my own room and closed the door as quietly as possible. I sat on my bed, heart racing, trying to convince myself that I had misunderstood what I'd heard. But maybe it was work-related. Maybe they were planning a surprise for me. Maybe there was some innocent explanation that would make sense of everything. But deep down, I knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. 20 minutes later, I heard Jake's voice in the living room. "Emma, are you home?" I took a deep breath, checked my appearance in the mirror, and went out to face him. He was standing by the front door, looking slightly disheveled and avoiding eye contact. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice normal. "I didn't know you were coming over." "I was just in the neighborhood," he said, which was obviously a lie since his office and apartment were both on the other side of the city. "Sophia mentioned you weren't feeling well, so I thought I'd check on you." The casual way he mentioned Sophia, as if it was perfectly normal for them to be discussing my health, made my stomach turn. "That was sweet of her to tell you," I managed to say. "Yeah, she's..." she's a good friend, Jake said, still not meeting my eyes. Are you feeling any better? We made awkward small talk for a few minutes before Jake claimed he had to leave for a work dinner. After he left, Sophia emerged from her room looking absolutely perfect, as always. "Oh, you're home," she said with apparent surprise. "I thought you were staying late at work today." "I got sick," I told her, studying her face for any sign of guilt or discomfort. "That's awful. You should have texted me. I could have brought you soup or something." She moved toward the kitchen, all concerned roommate energy. "Jake stopped by the way. He was worried about you." "Yeah, he mentioned that you told him I wasn't feeling well." "I hope that was okay," she said, opening the refrigerator and pulling out ingredients for what looked like an elaborate dinner for one. "I ran into him at that coffee shop on Clark Street and we got to talking. When I mentioned you were under the weather, he seemed really concerned." Over the next 2 weeks, I became a detective in my own life. I started paying attention to details I had previously ignored, documenting conversations and looking for patterns. What I discovered was worse than anything I could have imagined. The first breakthrough came when I decided to do some social media investigation. I started looking more carefully at Sophia's Instagram posts, particularly the ones from recent months. What I found was a carefully constructed narrative that told a story I hadn't realized was being written. In post after post, Sophia had been subtly inserting herself into my relationship with Jake. Photos of dinners that I thought were just roommate hangouts were captioned with references to deep conversations and connection. Pictures of our apartment were tagged with locations during times I knew Jake had been there, creating the impression that she and Jake were spending time together in romantic settings. Most disturbing of all were the comments. Jake had been liking and commenting on our posts regularly, something I had never paid attention to before. But it wasn't just casual social media interaction. His comments were flirtatious, personal, the kind of things you'd expect from someone who was more than just a friend. Under a photo of Sophia wearing a dress I had never seen before, Jake had commented, "Stunning as always." Under a picture of a sunset from our apartment balcony, he had written, "Wish I was there to see it with you." Under a post about her work achievements, he had commented, "So proud of you. You deserve all the success in the world." These weren't the comments of someone who was just being friendly with his girlfriend's roommate. These were the comments of someone who was emotionally invested in another woman. I screenshot everything, building a digital file of evidence that painted a clear picture of an emotional affair that had been going on for months. But I needed more concrete proof before I could act. My opportunity came the following Saturday. Sophia had told me she was going to be out of town for the weekend, visiting her sister in Milwaukee. Jake had said he was planning to spend Saturday working on a project for his company that required uninterrupted focus, so we wouldn't be seeing each other until Sunday evening. On Saturday morning, I told a mutual friend that I was planning a surprise visit to Jake's apartment with lunch from his favorite restaurant. I wanted to establish that I had a legitimate reason for showing up unannounced in case I needed an alibi later. But instead of going to Jake's apartment, I positioned myself at a coffee shop across the street from our building and waited. At 2:30 p.m., Jake's car pulled up outside our apartment building. At 2:45 p.m., I received a text from Sophia. "Having such a great time with my sister. Milwaukee is beautiful this time of year. Hope you're having a relaxing weekend." Along with the text was a photo that was clearly taken in our apartment. I could see our living room lamp in the background of what was supposed to be a Milwaukee hotel room. I had them. I waited until 6 p.m., giving them plenty of time to get comfortable before making my move. I called Jake's phone from the coffee shop. "Hey, babe," he answered, and I could hear that he was trying to sound casual, despite clearly being somewhere he shouldn't be. "Hi, I was thinking of surprising you with dinner. Are you still working hard on your project?" There was a pause. "Actually, I'm not at home right now. I had to run out to, get some food." "Oh, where did you go?" Maybe I can meet you there. Another pause. Longer this time. It's just a quick errand. I'll be back home soon. Why don't we stick with our plan to see each other tomorrow? Sure, I said sweetly. Love you. Love you too, he replied. And the words made me sick. 20 minutes later, I used my key to enter our apartment. I could hear music playing softly from Sophia's room, and the smell of the expensive candles she always lit when she wanted to create ambiance. I walked quietly down the hallway and stood outside her door, which was slightly ajar. Through the gap, I could see them clearly. Jake and Sophia were on her bed, fully clothed, but wrapped around each other in a way that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. They were talking quietly, intimately, with the kind of comfortable familiarity that comes from having done this many times before. I hate that we have to sneak around like this, Jake was saying, stroking Sophia's hair. I know, she replied, but it's almost over. I've been working on the Emma situation, and I think she's going to break up with you soon anyway. She's been pulling away for weeks. I think she's getting tired of the relationship. My heart stopped. The Emma situation. She had been working on the Emma situation. What do you mean working on it? Jake asked. Sophia smiled, and it was the coldest expression I had ever seen on her face. Let's just say I've been helping her realize that you two aren't as compatible as she thought. A few strategic conversations about your future goals, some observations about how different your communication styles are, some gentle suggestions that maybe she deserves someone who's more emotionally available. She was proud of herself. She was bragging about how she had been manipulating me, undermining my relationship, convincing me to pull away from the person I loved. Jake looked uncomfortable. That seems really manipulative, Sophia. It's not manipulative. It's kind, Sophia said firmly. I'm helping her come to a realization she would have come to eventually anyway. This way, she gets to maintain some dignity instead of being the girlfriend who got cheated on and left. But we are cheating, Jake pointed out. We're following our hearts, Sophia corrected. There's a difference. What we have is real, Jake. What you have with Emma is just habit. You've been settling for someone who doesn't challenge you, who doesn't inspire you to be your best self. I had heard enough, more than enough. I stepped back from the door, pulled out my phone, and started recording a video as I pushed the door open wider. Don't let me interrupt, I said loudly, holding my phone up to capture their shocked faces as they sprang apart. Please, continue explaining how you're doing me such a huge favor by destroying my life. The look of pure terror on both their faces was almost worth the months of pain they had put me through. The silence that followed my entrance was deafening. Jake and Sophia froze like deer in headlights, their faces cycling through shock, panic, and something that might have been shame if either of them were capable of genuine remorse. Emma, Jake started, scrambling to sit up straighter. This isn't what it looks like. I laughed, a sound with no humor in it whatsoever. Really? Because it looks like my boyfriend and my roommate having an affair in my own apartment while lying to me about where they are. But please, enlighten me about what it actually is. Sophia had recovered from her initial shock and was already switching into damage control mode. I could see her mind working, calculating her next move. Emma, sit down, she said, patting the bed beside her as if we were about to have a casual roommate chat. Let's talk about this like adults. Adults? I couldn't believe her audacity. Adults don't manipulate their supposed best friends into self-sabotaging their relationships. Adults don't gaslight people they claim to care about. Adults don't steal everything that matters to someone while pretending to be their biggest supporter. I never meant for it to happen this way, Jake said, running his hands through his hair. Emma, you have to believe me. I never intended for any of this to happen. When did it start? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady, despite the fact that I felt like I was falling apart inside. They looked at each other, having some silent communication that made me even angrier. Jake, I asked you a question. When did it start? About 4 months ago, he admitted quietly. 4 months. While I had been planning our weekend getaway to celebrate our 1-year anniversary. While I had been telling my parents how happy I was. While I had been falling asleep next to him, believing we were building something real together. And you? I turned to Sophia. When did you decide to go after my boyfriend? Her mask slipped for just a moment, and I saw something cold and calculating in her eyes. I didn't go after anyone, Emma. Sometimes people just connect in ways that can't be controlled. Bullshit. The word came out harder than I intended. You've been planning this from the beginning. The questions about Jake, the way you dressed when he came over, inserting yourself into our relationship. You saw something you wanted and you took it. You're being dramatic, Sophia said, standing up and smoothing down her dress. Relationships end all the time. People grow apart. It's not personal. Not personal? I stared at her in disbelief. You stole my boyfriend, sabotaged my work, messed with my personal life, and convinced me I was going crazy. How is that not personal? What are you talking about? Jake looked confused. What do you mean sabotaged your work? I turned to him, suddenly understanding that he had no idea about the extent of Sophia's manipulation. Someone called my boss and told him I was drinking too much and taking credit for other people's work. Someone canceled our dinner reservations, redirected my packages, had my credit card deactivated. Someone has been systematically screwing with my life for months. Jake's face went pale as he turned to look at Sophia. Sophia, tell me you didn't. I don't know what she's talking about, Sophia said. But her voice had gotten higher, the way it did when she was lying. You know exactly what I'm talking about, I said. Just like you know exactly how you've been manipulating me, feeding me doubts about Jake, convincing me to pull away from him so you could move in. That's paranoid thinking, Emma, Sophia said, crossing her arms. You're looking for someone to blame for your relationship problems. But the truth is that Jake and I connected because we have things in common that you two don't. We understand each other in ways that... Stop. Jake held up his hand, looking sick. Just stop. Emma's right, isn't she? You've been messing with her life. Sophia's composure cracked slightly. I've been trying to help her see the truth about your relationship. I've been a good friend to her. By calling her boss and lying about her? Jake's voice was getting louder. By making her think she was losing her mind? I was protecting my investment. Sophia snapped, and finally, her true nature came out. I saw what I wanted, and I took steps to get it. Emma was never going to be good enough for you, Jake. She's mediocre, average. She would have held you back from your potential. The room went completely silent. Jake looked like he'd been slapped, and I felt something shift inside me. All the hurt and betrayal I'd been feeling crystallized into something much clearer, pure, cold rage. Get out, I said quietly. Emma, Jake started. Both of you, get out of my apartment. Right now. This is my apartment too, Sophia said, her voice returning to its normal manipulative sweetness. I'm on the lease. You can't just kick me out. Watch me, I said, pulling out my phone. I'm calling the police and reporting a break-in. I'll tell them I came home and found two strangers in my apartment who refused to leave." "You can't do that," Sophia protested. "That's filing a false police report." "Is it?" I asked. "Because I don't know who you are anymore. The person I thought was my friend and roommate wouldn't have done any of this. So as far as I'm concerned, you're a stranger who's been living in my home under false pretenses." Jake was already moving toward the door. "Emma, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. This got out of hand and I never meant for you to get hurt." "Don't," I said without looking at him. "Don't apologize and don't pretend you care about whether I got hurt. If you cared about that, you would have broken up with me instead of cheating on me." He left without another word. Sophia, however, wasn't done. "You're making a huge mistake," she said, moving closer to me. "You think you're the victim here, but you're not. You're just someone who wasn't strong enough to keep what was hers. I did you a favor by showing you how weak your relationship really was." "You're right about one thing," I said, meeting her eyes steadily. "I wasn't strong enough to keep what was mine, but I'm strong enough to take back what you stole from me." Something in my tone must have gotten through to her, because for the first time since I'd known her, Sophia looked uncertain. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled, and I could feel that it wasn't a nice smile. "It means you have no idea who you just messed with. You think you're so smart, so manipulative, so good at playing people, but you made one crucial mistake." "What mistake?" "You assumed I was as weak as you needed me to be," I said. "You're about to find out how wrong you were." After Sophia finally left that night, though not before making it clear she had no intention of moving out permanently, I sat in my apartment and did something I hadn't done in months. I thought clearly about my situation without her voice in my head telling me how to feel about it. For the first time in forever, I was alone with my own thoughts, my own instincts, my own judgment. And what I realized was that I hadn't been myself for months. The self-doubt, the paranoia, the constant second-guessing, none of that was who I really was. That was who Sophia had needed me to be in order for her plan to work. The real Emma was someone who had graduated summa cum laude from college, someone who had landed a competitive job in a tough industry and had been succeeding at it, someone who had built genuine friendships and relationships based on trust and mutual respect, someone who was strong, capable, and definitely not the kind of person who would let someone destroy her life without consequences. It was time to remind everyone, including myself, who I really was. I started by making a list of everything Sophia had done to me, not just the obvious stuff like stealing Jake, but all the subtle manipulation, the gaslighting, the sabotage. I wrote down dates, times, specific conversations I could remember. I documented every lie she had told, every time she had undermined my confidence, every instance where she had positioned herself between me and the people I cared about. The pattern was clear and extensive. This hadn't been a crime of passion or a mistake that got out of hand. This had been a calculated, long-term campaign designed to systematically dismantle,